It was just past noon on a breezy Thursday when Mike Granger set two paper bags on his front porch. He had just come back from the local farmer's market, still shaking off the last traces of engine grease from the garage he worked at in town. He wasn't in a rush. No appointments. No emergencies. Just groceries, eggs, bananas, a half-gallon of milk, and a few veggies for the chili he planned on cooking that night. The bags were sturdy, upright, and nowhere near the walkway. He didn't know she had already seen them. Karen Westbrook, HOA president for the past 6 years and unofficial surveillance captain of the Oakbend cul-de-sac, had passed by his home. Exactly 4 minutes after the bags landed on the concrete, she didn't knock, didn't wave, just slowed her steps, stared at the bags for a long second, then continued walking, lips tight and expression unreadable. Mike didn't think much of it. He'd lived here almost 2 years now. The HOA didn't bother him much. He mowed his lawn, didn't throw wild parties, and parked in the driveway like everyone else. Sure, Karen had given him a weird look once when he left Christmas lights up into January, but that blew over. This time, it didn't blow over. The next morning, Mike found a printed notice taped to his front door. No HOA letterhead. No personal greeting. Just 12-point Times New Roman that read, "Per community regulations, remove unsanctioned porch items immediately. This is your first and final warning." He held it up, confused. His porch, it was empty now. The groceries had been brought inside within 20 minutes yesterday. He even checked his camera footage to be sure. There was nothing left out overnight. Not even his old boots, which usually sat beneath the bench. Mike smirked and shook his head, tossing the paper into the trash. Maybe someone else was meant to get the note. Maybe Karen printed it by mistake. Or maybe she'd finally lost it. Still, it stuck in the back of his mind. Something felt off. That evening, around 11:40 p.m., Mike checked his porch cam again out of curiosity. What he found made him pause. The feed showed Karen, fully dressed in a beige trench coat, walking across his front yard at 2:14 a.m. the previous night. In one hand, she held a flashlight, carefully angled low to the ground. In the other, a clipboard. She walked up to the porch steps, crouched low, and examined the bags as if inspecting evidence at a crime scene. She stayed there for almost a full minute, pointing her light directly into the grocery bags. Leaning closer at one point, almost sticking her head inside one dot, Mike watched the footage twice. She didn't knock, didn't even look at the door. She finished her inspection, backed away, and disappeared down the sidewalk, swallowed by the dark. He didn't know what to do with that. It was weird, sure, but technically she hadn't done anything illegal. Not yet. And besides, what could he even report? A 60-year-old HOA president inspected my apples and ran off. Still, something gnawed at him. It wasn't just the visit, it was the silence. Karen hadn't said a word since. No follow-up note. No warning. No official complaint. Just nothing. And then came Friday morning. Mike was standing in his kitchen, scrambling eggs, when he heard the distant sound of tires crunching slowly over gravel. He looked through the blinds. 2 police cars were parked at the end of his driveway. The eggs sizzled in the pan. He wiped his hands on a towel, walked to the door, and opened it just as the 2 officers approached. They weren't in a rush. No, urgency in their stride. One was a younger man, early 30s, polite posture. The other was older, with a heavy build and mirrored sunglasses that didn't come off, even in the shade. "Mr. Granger?" the older one asked. "Yeah. What's going on?" "We got a report about suspicious packages being delivered here. Wanted to ask you a few questions." Mike blinked. "Packages, groceries, sir? the younger officer added quietly. Someone said you've been stockpiling, possibly distributing. There was a long pause. Mike slowly turned, pointed toward his kitchen window. You mean the onions? The cops didn't smile. Mike knew this wasn't about groceries anymore. The older officer, name tag reading Sergeant Dalton, shifted his weight, glancing at the clipboard in his hand. We're not accusing you of anything, Mr. Granger. Just need to verify some claims made by a concerned neighbor. Mike leaned against the doorframe. Concerned about what? Vitamin C levels, the younger cop officer Delaney cracked. A faint smile. But Dalton didn't flinch. The complaint mentioned repeated grocery deliveries, large quantities, activities suggesting preparation for unsanctioned distribution. Mike blinked, unsure if this was a prank or some kind of psychological experiment. Distribution? You think I'm running a food cartel out of my fridge? Dalton didn't respond right away. We're just here to observe and document. That's all. Mike stepped back. Yeah, sure. Come in. Hope you're not allergic. 2 bell peppers. They walked through the house, Delaney taking casual glances, Dalton making mental notes. The groceries sat neatly in a kitchen cabinet. No boxes, no crates, no secret stockpile hidden under trapdoors. Just regular food. Dalton finally spoke again. You live alone, Mr. Granger? Yep. No guests recently. Any delivery services? Come frequently, just Amazon. And Grubhub if I get lazy. But mostly I cook. Dalton nodded slowly. Delaney looked at the spice rack, and then at Mike. Did the HOA ever give you a formal warning? Mike laughed once. You mean the anonymous note about porch aesthetics? Yeah, got that yesterday. Right before your informant took a flashlight tour of my fruit. Dalton stiffened slightly. You have that on camera. Of course I do. Mike pulled out his phone, opened the app, and played the footage. Karen, creeping up the steps, squatting like she was defusing a bomb. Dalton watched it all, then handed the phone back, face unreadable. That'll help us log the timeline. Thank you. Mike followed them to the door, still stunned. So what? Now, you gonna search my basement for rogue bananas? Delaney gave a tired shrug. We'll file a report. Probably won't go anywhere. Dalton nodded. But you might want to talk to your HOA. Something's stirring over there. Then they were gone. The silence afterward was worse than the visit. No word from Karen. No email from the HOA board. But the neighborhood buzzed. That night, Mike's phone vibrated with a message from a neighbor he barely knew, Lily Vargas, to doors down. Hey, just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened today. Karen's been talking about you in meetings. Said something about underground food trading. I thought she was exaggerating, but I didn't know she actually called the cops. Mike stared at the screen. Underground food trading. What even was that supposed to mean? He texted back, wait, she brought this up before the cops came. Lily replied, yeah, twice. She's been keeping a little notebook on people. You're not the only one, but she thinks you're the ringleader. Mike sat back in his chair, the ridiculousness of it all curdling into something darker. It wasn't just gossip. Karen was crafting a narrative. Something about him, something wrong, twisted, and now recorded in HOA files and police logs. And just like that, it became official. Mike Granger was no longer a neighbor. He was a target. The next day, he found a flyer on his windshield, not from a store or pizza place. It looked handmade, printed in grayscale on cheap paper. Across the top, it read, do you know what your neighbors are up to? Below it were grainy porch cam stills. One of Mike carrying the grocery bags. One of a box being delivered. Another of him dragging his trash bin out late at night. At the bottom, it read, "Report all suspicious behavior to HOA Security Watch. Anonymous tips accepted." There was no official seal, no signature, just an email address ending in oakbendwatch.net. He crumpled the flyer in one fist. Something bigger was happening. Karen wasn't just making noise. She was mobilizing. That night, Mike walked his property, checked all the camera angles. He made a list of what he'd recorded and where. And then he printed his own still frame, the one showing Karen on his porch at 2 a.m., inspecting his bags like they were contraband. He stuck it on his fridge and circled the timestamp with a red marker. He wasn't sure what Karen believed. Maybe she thought he was organizing a resistance. Maybe she imagined he was running some shadow network of grocery smugglers out of his single-story ranch. Or maybe, just maybe, she needed a villain in her story, and Mike had parked his cart in the wrong place. Either way, the war had already begun, and the next move wouldn't come from him. It would come from the HOA. The next morning felt different. It wasn't the weather sunny, still. Same birds nesting in the oak near Mike's driveway. It was something quieter, subtle, but real. A shift in how people moved, looked, reacted. When Mike stepped outside with his trash bin, he noticed it immediately. Mrs. Patel, usually chatty and warm, glanced up from watering her roses and suddenly turned away, pretending to adjust the nozzle. Her husband, normally friendly, didn't nod like usual. He just stared for a moment, then stepped back inside without a word. The isolation was creeping in. Mike stood in the middle of his driveway, unsure what to do with the silence pressing in from every direction. His phone buzzed again. "Lily, have you seen the HOA chat this morning?" "You probably won't be surprised." Mike didn't have access to the HOA board's internal group. He wasn't on the committee, didn't want to be, but Lily was. And she had screenshots. Karen had posted a long message. "We must remain vigilant. There are patterns happening here. Bulk grocery deliveries. Items left out in plain view. This is how alternative supply networks form in neighborhoods that lack proper oversight. It starts small. Then suddenly you have unregulated food trades, unauthorized garage sales, and unlicensed exchanges that threaten property values and safety. Stay alert. Watch, report. The HOA was created for order. We must protect our standards." Beneath it were several thumbs up and fire emojis. A few polite comments. A few not so polite ones. But no one disagreed. No one questioned the logic. Karen wasn't being called paranoid. She was being called prepared. Mike paced in the living room, muttering under his breath, "Unlicensed exchanges. What the hell is that supposed to mean?" That afternoon, the neighborhood group chat, the one with all the residents, started buzzing too. Someone named Doug posted a blurry image of a white box on a porch. Captioned, "Anyone know who this belongs to? Just appeared. Kinda weird. Not." From Amazon, another neighbor chimed in. "Looks like one of Mike's. Same brand as that box he had last week." Then someone else, "Should we be concerned? HOA might be right." No one tagged him directly, but the implication was loud. A slow wave was forming. One person says something strange. The next just repeats it, but louder. And soon it becomes belief. Mike tried to calm himself. It was just talk. Just people with nothing better to do. But deep down, he knew something else had taken root here. He went back through his security camera footage. Days of normal recordings. Some squirrels. A few deliveries. Nothing suspicious. Until last night. At 2:57 a.m., a shadow moved near the side of the house. Not Karen this time. Too tall. Too fast. The figure stayed in the blind spot between the garage light and the side fence. Just for a few seconds, then gone. No clear image. Just movement. Mike paused the frame and stared at it. Someone else was watching now. The next evening, Mike came home to a package on his porch. No label, no name, just a cardboard box with a black marker line across the top. He didn't touch it, just filmed it, documented it, took it inside and left it sealed. Then, an hour later, his power flickered, briefly, just enough to reset the kitchen clock. When it came back on, his phone pinged new email. It was from an address he didn't recognize: Oakbend anonymous at protonmail.com. Subject line: Time's up. The message was one sentence: "We know what you're doing. We're watching." There was no name, no threat, but the implication was cold and deliberate. Mike sat there, staring at the screen. All this, over groceries, over to brown paper bags. Except it wasn't about groceries anymore. It was about fear, control. Someone, maybe more than one person, was feeding this fire now. And the HOA wasn't a buffer. It was the fuel. He picked up his phone and texted Lily again. "I need every HOA record Karen's filed about me. All of it. Even the unofficial stuff." She didn't respond right away. But 10 minutes later, she replied, "You're not going to like what you see." The email from Lily came just after midnight. Mike had been sitting in the dim light of his garage, a beer untouched in his hand, the box from earlier still sealed on the workbench. He hadn't opened it. Something about the thick black line across the top, drawn by hand with no clear purpose, made his skin crawl. He kept glancing at it like it might start ticking. Lily's message read, "Sharing this off record. Don't forward it. Don't mention my name. Karen keeps personal files on board members too." There were 3 attachments. The first was a scanned document titled, "Subject, Michael Granger, Activity Log Unofficial." It was 5 pages long. Each entry was dated and written in Karen's unmistakably tight handwriting. She had documented everything: times of delivery, what brands the bags appeared to be from, whether Mike brought the items inside immediately or left them out. There were notes like 2 large brown bags, Whole Foods logo, left unattended for 16 minutes. Observed subject carrying multiple canned goods on 6/14, possible long-term storage prep. Box delivered at 3:20 p.m. Not retrieved until 4:05 p.m. Signs of carelessness or testing limits. There were over 30 entries, going back nearly 4 months. Mike felt the weight of each one like a brick stacking in his gut. He hadn't realized how long Karen had been watching, how much of his routine she had twisted into something else. Every minute delay, every grocery run, all transformed into data points for her theory. The second attachment was worse. It was an internal HOA memo marked confidential from Karen to board members' names redacted. The subject line, concerning developments related to Granger property. It was filled with vague language, but laced with quiet venom. Words like unusual stockpiling, possible group coordination, and preliminary signs of organized distribution leapt off the page. Karen had started referring to Mike as the node, as if he were some kind of central hub, in a conspiracy web she'd built entirely in her mind. And then, in the last paragraph, while there is no proof of illegal activity yet, the consistency of these patterns combined with Mr. Granger's passive-aggressive behavior and tendency to challenge authority warrants closer surveillance. We must consider preemptive measures before this behavior influences others. The safety and image of Oakbend is at stake. Mike stared at that sentence for a long time. The third attachment was a voice memo. Karen's voice came through slightly, muffled, like she was speaking while walking. "I saw him again last night, standing outside. He's not just collecting food. He's mapping the neighborhood. Watching I don't care if the others think I'm paranoid. Something is happening, and I won't be caught off guard. Then silence. The recording ended. Mike pushed back from the workbench, chest tight. He wasn't angry anymore. He was disturbed. There was a difference between overreach and obsession. Karen had passed it a long time ago. But what chilled him more wasn't the files, it was the redacted names. Karen wasn't working alone. Someone else was feeding her paranoia. Maybe even encouraging it. He walked back inside, poured the beer, down the sink, and locked every door. The next morning, things got worse. A new flyer appeared. This one wasn't in black and white. It was full color, glossy, professionally printed. It was slipped into every mailbox on the street, folded neatly like a community newsletter. At the top, keeping Oakbend safe. How to spot the signs of unauthorized exchange activity beneath it. Bullet points, frequent grocery deliveries boxes. Left out for extended periods, neighbors loitering on their own property, garage lights on at odd. Horse conversations not initiated by HOA channels. Mike's face wasn't in this one. But it didn't need to be. Every bullet point described him perfectly. And then he noticed something even stranger. The flyer listed a new neighborhood watch liaison contact number. He called it. A man picked up. Calm voice. Slight accent. Oakbend security desk, he said. Who is this? Mike asked. Your liaison. The man replied, with a pause that lasted just a bit too long. We're here to help. Mike hung up. Oakbend didn't have a security desk. At least it didn't used to. Mike didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, the silence around him dense and unnatural, like the calm before a storm. Outside, the streetlights buzzed softly over Oakbend's pristine sidewalks. Too quiet. Too perfect. The kind of neighborhood that prided itself on appearances while something deeper and darker curled underneath. That security desk call stuck with him. Oakbend never had official security. The HOA budget didn't even account for it. He'd seen the annual breakdown last year, when someone accidentally left a packet on a community bench. Nothing in the reports, nothing in the meetings, and nothing in the bylaws. So who had he just spoken to? By morning, Mike was done waiting. He walked straight to the HOA office, which, ironically, sat inside a repurposed model home at the front of the subdivision. It still had the fake real estate posters in the windows and a stone welcome mat out front. The door was unlocked. Inside, Karen sat at a table with two men he didn't recognize. One was older, graying at the sides, dark jacket over a polo shirt. The other was younger, mid-30s, with a buzz cut and eyes that didn't match his polite smile. Karen didn't look surprised to see him. Michael, she said, without standing. We weren't expecting you. Mike didn't answer right away. He looked at the men. Who are they? The older man extended a hand. Robert Craig. I'm with the Community Oversight Initiative. You could say I specialize in residential compliance systems. The younger man nodded. We're here as consultants. Consultants? Mike asked. Since when does a small-town HOA need consultants? Karen folded her hands. Since certain residents began showing troubling patterns. Your situation has gone beyond standard protocol. Mike shook his head, smiling without humor. Over groceries. Craig leaned back. This isn't about food, Mr. Granger. It's about behavior, influence. Unchecked deviation from established norms can destabilize a community faster than you think. The words didn't sound real. They sounded rehearsed, scripted, like a corporate training manual had come to life. Mike stepped closer. So you've invented a threat, hired fake security, and now what? You're going to install cameras in my kitchen. Karen spoke before anyone else could. We haven't decided on action yet, but we've opened a file. Mike froze. A file? Craig nodded. Your name is part of a larger report now. Risk level 2. That means enhanced observation, social mapping, influence tracking. Mike laughed once, hollow. You're kidding. The younger consultant smiled again. Not at all. In fact, you're being remarkably calm about this. That actually helps your rating. Mike took a step back. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He was realizing just how far this had gone. Karen had found outside help people who spoke her language control, order, systems. They'd validated her paranoia, wrapped it in jargon, and now it had a title, Community Oversight Initiative. He left without another word. Back home, Mike opened the sealed box on his porch. For the first time, inside was something completely unexpected. A binder. Nothing illegal. No threat. Just a binder filled with old Oakbend HOA records years old. Newsletters. Minutes from meetings. Budget reports. All copied and filed neatly. One note paper clipped to the front. They erased the original records from the site. These are the real ones. Look at the security vote from 2019. You'll understand everything. He flipped through the pages quickly, heart pounding. There it was. March 2019. Proposal to establish an internal HOA surveillance initiative voted down 6-1. The lone vote in favor, Karen Westbrook. The notes beside her proposal described a community patrol unit, anonymous reporting lines, and the creation of an internal watch list for residents showing pattern deviation. Mike sat down. This hadn't started with him. Karen had tried to build this for years ago. Back then, no one supported it. But now, thanks to paranoia and whispers and to paper grocery bags, she had found her moment. He picked up his phone, dialed Lily. We need to talk. And not over the phone, she agreed immediately. But as Mike hung up, he noticed something outside his window. The younger consultant, the buzzcut guy, was standing across the street, pretending to jog. His phone aimed at Mike's house, not filming, streaming. Mike parked his streets over from Lily's house and walked the rest of the way through a narrow alley that cut behind the backyards. He wasn't paranoid, he was cautious now. There was a difference. He'd noticed the same blue car circling his street twice that morning, and the jogger from last night had stood still for almost 6 full minutes before moving on. Whatever Karen had started, it wasn't hers anymore. Someone else had picked it up and run with it. Lily met him at her back door, ushered him into the kitchen without speaking. The blinds were closed, lights dim. She locked the door behind him. No. Phones, she said quietly. Mike handed his over. She put both of theirs in the microwave dead zone. She didn't smile, didn't joke, just sat across from him and slid a folder across the table. What's this? Screenshots. Messages. The HOA board group chat. You're not going to like it. Mike opened the folder. Dozens of images, texts between Karen and a man named Lyle Rossner, HOA vice president. The name hadn't come up before, mostly because Lyle was one of those invisible suburban figures, always voting, never speaking, always present at meetings, but never remembered. He skimmed the messages. Karen, he's already spreading influence. He's got Lily now, too. I saw them talking by her mailbox. Lyle, we need to isolate her before it spreads. I'll handle it. Karen, if she resists, flag her. We'll need a new watch category soon. Category C, Lyle, done. Moving her to C tier tonight. Mike looked up. What does that mean? C tier. Lily took a deep breath. They created a ranking system. People who don't conform get flagged. First, it's Category B observation, then Category C intervention. Mike's heart sank. "You're on the list because we talked at a mailbox," Lily nodded. "But it's worse," she said. "Rossner? He's not just HOA. He's ex-private security. I looked him up. He used to work for a community enforcement company in Florida. You know those gated neighborhoods with their own rules? That's where Karen found him." Mike rubbed his forehead. "So this whole thing was planned?" Lily finished. She didn't lose her mind. She waited for an opportunity. "You just made the perfect target." Mike stood up and began pacing. "But why me? What did I even do?" "You didn't do anything," Lily said. "You didn't play along. You left groceries on the porch. You ignored her warning. You made her feel invisible." Mike stopped. "So I triggered a neighborhood surveillance state because I didn't kiss the ring, basically." Later that evening, Mike returned home and checked his doorbell camera history. One video stood out. Timestamp 312.m. It showed a small child's bike rolling past the sidewalk. No rider, just rolling. Alone. Seconds later, a man in a dark hoodie walked by, slowly scanning the yards. Then he paused, stood in front of Mike's home, and took a photo. Flash off, but the camera picked it up anyway. The glow of a phone screen, the faint snap of a shutter. Then he walked away. Mike's chest tightened. It wasn't Karen anymore. Whoever was involved now wasn't trying to prove a point. They were documenting something, creating a timeline, just like Karen's notes. Except this wasn't about groceries or porch clutter. It was surveillance for its own sake. At 2:43 a.m., Mike was still awake. His house was dark, curtains drawn, cameras recording. Then his phone lit up. Unknown number. Just one message. Category B adjusted. Recommendation: escalate to Category C. Subject displays classic destabilization behavior. Drafting intervention. Protocol. Mike stared at the screen. No name. No context. Just a confirmation. He had been escalated. He waited for more. Another text. A call. A knock. Nothing came. But across the street, in the house with the always dark windows, he saw a faint blue glow flicker through the curtains, then vanish. By Saturday morning, the air in Oakbend felt different, heavier. The silence was no longer quiet, it was calculated. Every garage door seemed slower to open, every curtain slower to close. Even the neighborhood dogs had stopped barking at strangers. It was as if everyone had received the same silent warning, one Mike hadn't heard but could feel. The previous night's message still echoed in his mind. Category B adjusted. Recommendation: escalate to Category C, whatever Category C meant. Mike wasn't waiting to find out. He drove 3 blocks over to visit Jerry, an older neighbor who had lived in Oakbend since it was built. Retired firefighter. Quiet. Always polite. The kind of guy who waved but never said much. But Mike remembered something Lily had said once. Jerry had voted against Karen's surveillance proposal in 2019 and had gotten mysteriously removed from the board a month later. Mike knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Eventually, the door creaked open. Jerry looked tired, unshaven, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were cautious. "Mike, you shouldn't be here." "I know," Mike said quietly, "but I think you're the only one who remembers how all of this started." Jerry looked at him for a long moment, then opened the door wider. Inside, the house smelled like burnt coffee and paperwork. Boxes were stacked by the walls, old folders sticking out at odd angles. Jerry led him to a small study with the blinds taped shut. "I kept the records they tried to bury," he said. "Didn't trust the cloud." He handed Mike a USB drive. Everything Karen started the surveillance proposal. her contacts, even the consultant company Koi, they're all in there. But it's not just Karen. It's Oakbend. From the beginning. Mike raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Jerry sank into a chair. This neighborhood was never just homes and fences. When it was developed back in 2004, the HOA included something unusual in the founding documents, a clause that allowed the board to contract third-party stability partners during times of community disruption. Mike frowned. What kind of disruption? Anything they defined as a social threat. Stockpiling, odd behavior, non-participation in HOA events. They never activated it until now. Mike felt his chest tighten. Karen found the clause. Jerry nodded. And Lyle Rossner he used to be one of those partners. She didn't just find a consultant. She found someone who helped build the original system in other states. Mike sat in stunned silence. It was never about me, he muttered. No, Jerry said. You were just a crack in the paint. But they saw it. And once one crack appears, they repaint the whole wall. Jerry looked up, eyes sharp, or tear it down. That night, Mike returned home and loaded the S. Inside was everything: emails, reports, invoices, payments made to Civa Group, a shadowy consulting firm that had rebranded 3 times in 5 years. And most disturbing of all, an internal Oakbend HOA memo from just 2 weeks ago. Subject line, Category C Protocol Activation Plan. The document listed 5 names. Mike's was at the top. Lily's name was second. Then 3 others residents Mike didn't even know. All flagged as non-conforming influencers. The activation plan included social pressure mapping, routine home checks, and a line that chilled him to the bone. If peaceful redirection fails, initiate stage to displacement tactics target home sales, HOA violations, reputational harm, and informal neighborhood isolation procedures. Mike stood, dizzy. They weren't just watching anymore. They were planning to push people out. He ran to the window, checked every corner of his lawn. Then he pulled his porch camera of footage from the last 24 hours. At 4:19 a.m., someone had been on his property again, but not Karen. This time, it was the buzzcut consultant, the one who smiled too politely. He crouched near the bushes, holding something small, left it beneath the shrubs. Mike threw on a hoodie, stepped outside, heart pounding. He moved to the spot, hands shaking. There, nestled in the dirt, was a thin, round metal disc. A microphone. Battery-powered. Bluetooth-capable. They hadn't just escalated his category. They had bugged his property. Mike stared at the tiny microphone. In his palm, the neighborhood quiet around him like it was holding its breath. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't theory, or rumor, or drama spun by an obsessive HOA president. It was real, and it was happening right now. Back inside, he dropped the device into a metal toolbox, slammed it shut, and sat at his desk. The files Jerry gave him plus the USB were all backed up, hidden copies onto flash drives. One taped under his kitchen drawer, the other already stashed at Lily's house. He didn't know what the next move would be, but he knew who would make it. And he was done waiting for them. Mike walked into the HOA office that same afternoon. Head held high. No knocking. No appointment. Just a purpose. Karen looked up from the center table like she'd been expecting him. So, she said slowly, "You found it." Mike held up his phone. "I found a lot more than that." Across the table, Lyle Rossner didn't stand. Didn't flinch, just closed a thin black binder and tapped it twice with his finger. "You're escalating this, Mike," Lyle said calmly. "We can still de-escalate you." Mike tilted his head. "Is that a threat or a customer service line?" Karen stood. "No one's trying to harm you." But you need to understand that compliance isn't optional. It's how communities survive. Mike stepped closer, his voice steady. You call this survival? You're pushing people out. You're inventing enemies. And you're creating a system that doesn't serve the neighborhood it consumes it. Karen's smile faded. You always thought you were above it, she whispered. You didn't show up to meetings. You didn't read the bulletins. You left bags on your porch like it meant nothing. Mike stared, because it did mean nothing. Not to me, she snapped. There it was. For a moment, everything in the room went quiet. Then Lyle reached into his pocket and slid a folded paper across the table. Mike picked it up. It was a formal violation summary from the HOA, citing him for public storage of unregulated goods failure to participate in mandatory security survey disruption of community harmony. Through non-cooperative conduct at the bottom, it read, Final notice. Property review scheduled. Recommendation, reconsider residency. Mike laughed bitterly. So this is the peaceful redirection. Huh? Lyle leaned forward. Mike, Oakbend is a model neighborhood. A brand. What you call control others, call preservation, and what you call a file, Mike said coldly, is already in the inbox of 4 local reporters, 2 lawyers, and a neighborhood forum with 15,000 members. Lyle blinked. Karen's face went pale. Mike slipped the phone back into his pocket. You built a watch list. I built an audience. That night, the police returned. But this time, Mike was ready. He greeted them calmly, body cam filming in full view. His phone already recording. Sergeant Dalton again. Same mirrored sunglasses. But this time, he looked different. Stiffer. We received reports you've been recording and distributing private community documents. Dalton said. Mike nodded. And I've received confirmation from a legal rep that as long as those documents concern my own name, they're fully shareable under California Civil Code Section 5215. Want a copy of the statute? Dalton didn't answer. But Delaney, the younger officer, gave Mike a small nod, almost imperceptible. We're done here, Dalton muttered. Just be mindful moving forward. Mike closed the door behind them. Heartbeat slow and steady. He wasn't afraid anymore. The final blow came 3 days later. An anonymous article hit a local news blog. HOA or private police? One man uncovers Oakbend's secret surveillance scheme. The story exploded online. Dozens of comments, reposts, even a call-in radio segment. Lily shared it across every forum in the area. And Jerry? He'd already submitted a petition to the State HOA Compliance Board. By the weekend, the glossy flyers stopped appearing. Karen's porch light stayed off, and Lyle? No one had seen him in days. Mike stood on his porch the following Monday, sipping coffee as the wind moved through the trees. It was quiet, but naturally quiet now. The kind of peace that wasn't enforced, that didn't hide microphones or carry clipped smiles. Then he noticed a paper on his doormat. He stepped over, bent down slowly, and picked it up, a single envelope. No name, just a sticky note on the front. You think this is over? Category D is irreversible. No return address. No explanation. Just silence. Mike looked up. Across the street. A new family was moving in. Smiling. Waving. Unaware. And behind them, in the shadows of an upstairs window, stood someone watching, holding a clipboard and a pen. The end.